There is a test that most American parents will fail without realizing they are taking it. Ask them where American schools rank globally. They will say top 10, maybe top 5. Many will say number 1. After all, America spends more per student than almost any other country on Earth. It has the most prestigious universities in the world. It produces more Nobel laureates than any other nation. So American schools must be among the best on the planet. Now show them the data. In the most recent international assessment of student performance, American 15-year-olds ranked 28th in math, 12th in reading, and 18th in science. Behind Estonia, behind Poland, behind Vietnam, behind almost every developed country that Americans rarely think about. The United States spends roughly $15,000 per student per year, one of the highest figures in the world. Countries that spend less than half that amount consistently outperform American students on every meaningful measurement. This is not a recent decline. American students have been ranking below international peers for over 2 decades, and the rest of the developed world has been watching it happen, wondering how the richest country on Earth, the country that landed on the moon, built the internet, and dominates global technology, somehow cannot teach its children to read or do math at the level of countries with a fraction of its resources. This is the story of how that happened. Let us start with the money problem. The United States spends more per student than almost any other developed nation. Roughly $15,000 per student per year on average in K-12 education. That is more than Germany, more than France, more than Japan, more than South Korea, more than Finland. The only countries that spend more are Luxembourg, Norway, and a handful of small, wealthy nations. For all that spending, American students rank in the middle of the pack globally, sometimes below the middle. Estonia spends about half of what America spends per student and consistently ranks in the top 10 globally in every subject. Poland spends roughly a third of what America spends and ranks ahead of the United States in math. Vietnam, a developing country with a tiny education budget, regularly outperforms American students in science. The money isn't the problem. The money is being spent. The problem is where it's going and what it's buying. A significant portion of American education spending goes to administrative overhead, bureaucracy, infrastructure costs, and standardized testing programs. The actual classroom, the teacher, the materials, the instruction, receives a smaller percentage of total education funding than in countries like Finland, where the system is designed to put resources directly in front of students. Teacher pay is a perfect example. American teachers earn less, relative to other college-educated professionals in their own country, than teachers in almost every other developed nation. In Finland, teaching is a competitive, prestigious profession that requires a master's degree and pays comparably to other professional careers. In the United States, the average teacher salary is significantly below the average salary for college graduates. Many American teachers work second jobs. Many spend their own money on classroom supplies. Many leave the profession within 5 years. A country that pays its teachers less than its accountants and then wonders why student outcomes are mediocre is a country that has stopped taking education seriously. Now, if this is the kind of content that makes you see the system you grew up inside differently, subscribe to this channel right now. Turn on notifications, and drop a comment telling me one thing you wish your school had taught you that it never did. That engagement is how we keep making content like this. Let's keep going. There is another problem. American schools teach children to take tests. Finnish schools teach children to think. The American education system has been dominated by standardized testing for over 2 decades. No child left behind. Race to the top. State testing programs. Federal testing programs. Schools are ranked, funded, and evaluated based on standardized test scores. Teachers are evaluated, hired, and fired based on standardized test scores. Entire curriculums have been built backward from the test rather than from what students actually need to learn. The result is a generation of American students who can fill in bubbles but struggle with critical thinking, problem solving, and analytical reasoning. Test scores have stagnated or declined despite billions of dollars poured into testing infrastructure. The tests do not actually measure learning. They measure how well students can perform on tests. Finland tried this approach and abandoned it. Finnish students are tested less than students in almost any other developed country. There are no national standardized exams until students are nearly finished with secondary school. Teachers design their own assessments. The curriculum is built around developing reasoning skills, creativity, and the ability to learn independently. Finnish students consistently rank among the top 10 in the world in every subject. Singapore, which dominates international rankings, does not use the American testing model either. South Korea uses a different model. Estonia uses a different model. The countries that outperform America academically have all moved away from the testing-centric approach that America has doubled down on. America is alone in believing that more tests produce better students. The data says the opposite. The school day itself is also broken in ways the rest of the world finds confusing. American schools start absurdly early. Many high schools begin classes at 7:30 a.m. or earlier, which is biologically incompatible with adolescent sleep patterns according to every major sleep researcher in the field. The American Academy of Pediatrics has repeatedly recommended that middle and high schools start no earlier than 8:30 a.m. Most American schools ignore this recommendation. Students arrive exhausted, cannot focus, and underperform because they are operating on insufficient sleep during the most cognitively demanding hours of the day. In Finland, the school day typically starts between 8 and 9 a.m. and ends in the early afternoon. Students get longer breaks. They have time for physical activity. They have time to actually rest between intensive learning sessions. The result is a system where students perform better despite spending fewer hours in school than American students. The American school year is also structured around an agricultural calendar that has not been relevant for over a century. The long summer break exists because rural students used to be needed for farm work in the 1800s. That has not been true for generations. Yet the summer break persists, and research consistently shows that American students lose a measurable amount of academic progress every summer, particularly in math and reading. Countries with more evenly distributed school years and shorter, more frequent breaks do not have this summer slide problem to the same degree. Lunch is another revealing comparison. In France, school lunches are treated as part of the educational experience. Children sit down to a multi-course meal with real food, eaten slowly, often with vegetables, protein, and dessert. Lunch periods can run an hour or more. The cultural understanding is that nutrition and the social experience of eating together are part of what school is supposed to teach. In America, school lunches average around 20 minutes from start to finish. The food is often highly processed, low quality, and designed to be cheap rather than nourishing. Many districts contract their food service to companies that supply prison food. The country that spends more on education than almost any other nation feeds its children, worse than countries that spend a fraction as much. Like this video right now. Share it with someone who has children in the American school system. Leave a comment telling me what your school lunches looked like growing up. Now let me bring this home. The biggest difference between American schools and successful school systems around the world isn't money, isn't curriculum, and isn't even teaching methods. It's the cultural attitude toward education. In Finland, teachers are respected the way doctors are respected. Becoming a teacher is competitive. Teachers have autonomy in their classrooms. They are trusted as professionals. The job is considered honorable, meaningful, and worth pursuing. In South Korea, education is treated as the most important investment a family can make. Students study intensely. Parents take education seriously. Teachers hold significant authority. The system has its own pressures and downsides, but the cultural commitment to education is total. In Singapore, teaching is one of the most respected and competitive professions. The country invests heavily in teacher development and pays teachers competitively with other professionals. The cultural understanding is that the quality of a country's schools determines the quality of its future. In America, teachers are blamed for outcomes they don't control. They're underpaid, overworked, and treated as the front line of every social problem the country refuses to address elsewhere. They're expected to provide therapy, parenting, nutrition, security, and emotional support to students whose families and communities can't provide those things, while also somehow producing high test scores. When they fail to do the impossible, they're blamed. When they succeed, they're forgotten. American political discourse around education spends an enormous amount of time arguing about curriculum content, book bans, gender issues, and political ideology in classrooms. The rest of the developed world watches this debate and finds it baffling. While Americans argue about what books should be banned, students in Singapore are mastering advanced mathematics. While Americans debate whether to teach about slavery accurately, students in Finland are learning to read across multiple languages. While Americans fight about pronouns in classrooms, students in Estonia are leading the world in digital literacy. The countries beating America academically aren't doing it because they figured out a magic formula. They're doing it because they decided education actually matters, and then they invested in making it work. America says education matters. The data says it doesn't put its money, time, or cultural priority where its mouth is. Here's the most uncomfortable comparison of all. American higher education is genuinely world-class. The top American universities are among the best on the planet. Harvard, MIT, Stanford, Yale, and Berkeley attract talented students from every country on Earth. But that's not because American schools produce those students. It's because those students are largely the result of two things: wealth that allowed their families to invest in private education, tutors, and enrichment programs, or because they are international students from countries with better K-12 systems who came to America for college because of brand prestige, not because they got a better foundational education in America. The American K-12 system produces inequality. Wealthy families pay $40,000 to $60,000 a year for elite private schools that genuinely rival the best schools in the world. Middle-class families move into specific zip codes to access better public schools, driving up real estate prices and excluding lower-income families. Lower-income families are concentrated in underfunded schools with overcrowded classrooms, fewer resources, and burnt-out teachers. The result is a two-tier system that produces brilliant graduates from the top tier and struggles to teach basic literacy in the bottom tier. International rankings average these outcomes together and produce the mediocre results that put America in the middle of the global pack. But the average hides the deeper truth. America has world-class education for those who can afford it, and developing country-level education for those who cannot. That's not a public education system. That's a class sorting system dressed up as schools. The rest of the world doesn't hate America's schools. They are just confused by them. They can't understand how a country spends so much, produces so little, debates so loudly about everything except what works, and refuses to learn from countries that have already solved the problems America keeps insisting are unsolvable. The solutions exist. Finland figured them out. Singapore figured them out. Estonia figured them out. South Korea figured them out. Every one of these countries publishes their methods openly. Every one of them has been studied by American researchers, educators, and policy analysts. Nothing about what works is a mystery. The only mystery is why America refuses to do any of it. And that refusal isn't an education problem. It's a cultural problem. A country that treats teachers like babysitters, treats education like a political battleground, treats children like data points, and treats learning like a product to be tested rather than a process to be developed, will keep producing the results it is currently producing. The data isn't broken. The system is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Thank you for watching. If this video showed you something about your country's schools that you hadn't considered, that's not an attack on America. That's the conversation American education was never willing to have with itself. If you want more content that asks the questions everyone is thinking but nobody will say out loud, subscribe to this channel, hit the bell, share this with a parent, a teacher, or anyone who still thinks the American education system is broken because of something other than the choices America keeps making. We'll see you in the next one. Reason over rituals, always.